On the outskirts of the Cetra galaxy, in a long-forsaken place where the stars grow dim and the darkness seems alive, an Ark-class ship floats. It has not transmitted a signal for 300 years. The ship was called Talus, and on board, according to ancient records, lived the last representative of an extinct civilization, the Haihara. They disappeared suddenly, leaving behind only fragments of technology and cursed worlds that no observer has ever set foot on. The ship discovered Ornella 9 by picking up a strange pulse, a repeated fragment of speech in an unknown language. But something about the sound made the blood turn in everyone who listened to it. One said he heard his own thoughts in it, but not some of his own voices. The study was led by a team of 6 people. Among them was linguist and cryptographer Aleira V, who suffered from a rare form of echo sleep. Every night she heard phrases in a foreign language, repeated over and over as if someone was trying to tell her something. And one of these phrases coincided with the message from the ship. When they arrived on board the Talus, it turned out that it was not lifeless. The systems were working, the air was fresh, and a communications room appeared, a glass capsule with something moving inside, something with eyes that reflected constellations that were not present in this part of space. It opened its eyes and spoke the name of Aleira. Aleira froze. The crew around her was silent, too stunned to react. The creature's words echoed through the hangar. Aleira V of Narti, the last to hear the call. You came too late. It's impossible, she whispered, coming closer to the capsule. Who are you? Where did my name come from? The creature inside was translucent, as if woven from light and mist, but its features were distinct. High cheekbones, long fingers, eyes that shimmered like surface water reflecting the stars. No earthly being looked like this, and yet there was something familiar about it. We are not of your flesh. We are the echo of the first. We were here when the light was just learning to speak, and you are the bearer of the names. There are 2 of us left. 2? The expedition captain asked again, choosing a weapon. Who's the other one? The creature looked at him with a slight sadness, and at that moment all the lights on the Talus flared red. The life support system suddenly changed pressure. The ship began to shake. He woke up. A faint sound echoed along the walls. Not just a noise, but a whisper, as if thousands of voices were arguing with each other without stopping. One of the engineers screamed, black liquid oozing from his ear. He fell. Aleira felt something flare up in her chest, as if someone inside her was opening a long-forgotten portal. Phrases she had dreamed of since childhood now formed a single message. She could distinguish the language of the creature. You are the guide. Through your language will return to this world. Only through the word can the shadow be defeated. But if he is freed, who is he? Aleira's voice trembled, but the heat of ancient knowledge was already burning inside. The creature slowly raised its hand, and an image appeared in the air. A colossal shadow of space floating through it, with eyes like black holes watching not only light, but also meaning. He is the last nameless, the killer of worlds, the devourer of language. When he speaks, civilizations fall silent forever. And at that moment, a dull thud was heard on the outer hull of the ship, then a second one. Something was knocking outside. He found us. The third impact shook the Talus's hull, sending everyone falling to the floor. The lights went out, leaving only the emergency lights flashing blood red. The atmosphere thickened noticeably. The air became thick, like before a storm, only this was a storm outside of time. The captain shouted into the comm, "Everyone back to the shuttle, we're leaving!" But the gateways were already blocked. The creature in the capsule, without moving, quietly said, "Now you are in his circle. Here the laws of matter are not observed. Here the word reigns, or the lack thereof." Aleira did not hear the captain scream, not because he was silent, but because there was no sound. Everything was soundless, no steps, no movements, not even a heartbeat. The world turned off the audio. She tried to scream, But even inside herself she heard nothing. Only one sound cut through the vacuum, her own thoughts, spoken in a voice that was not her own. "Your name is the key. Name yourself and you will become the weapon." A sign flared inside her chest, like an ancient glyph made of light and pain. Her mind was gripped by heat, as if someone were opening all her memories at once, discovering the forgotten, even me, that had not yet happened. Aleira whispered, mentally, "I am Lirna V, the last keeper of the word." The capsule disintegrated into dust, and the being stepped forward, waiting. It had changed. Its body was more defined now, with translucent wings of energy that pulsed in rhythm with her heartbeat. It was no longer just a remnant of the Hiara. It was a symbol, and Aleira could feel it. It appeared outside the ships, in the portholes, something without form. It shimmered with blackness, like the very negation of existence. Its eyes were two spiral madnesses that faded in the stars. From its mouth flowed darkness, turning metal into dust. "He has come to swallow the last word," said the symbol, "but you can contact him. You are the speaker." Aleira stepped forward. The floor beneath her feet began to transform, forming a circle of light and symbols. Each step she took was spoken in the Hiari language, and with each word the darkness receded for a moment. But the Nameless One had a voice too, and now he was awakening. He didn't talk, he taught. And with every breath he took, the people around her forgot who they were. Their names were erased. Only Aleira continues, while she remembered her name. There is emptiness all around. Aleira stood in the circle of the word. It pulsed beneath her feet, as if her heart were guarding her mind at the very moment. Because of her attitude toward the circle, everything was collapsing, not as the appearance of matter, but as thought. People were lost in themselves, forgot who they were. One of the officers, Taryn, fell to his knees and whispered, "Who am I? Who am I? Who am I?" He crumbled to dust as if his name was all that held him together. "This is his breath," said the symbol standing nearby. "He is the void between words, nameless. His power is erasure. When the name disappears, so does the bearer." Aleira looked into the eyes of the creature beyond the porthole. It was grown up. It was expanding, as if the whole of Talus was now inside it, not outside. She felt a second language open inside her, ancient, hoarse, speaking through 1,000 throats. It was the language of the shadow. It called to her. It promised peace, oblivion, release from the pain of memory. "No," she whispered. "I am not oblivion. I am memory." And then she spoke. The words weren't just sounds. Each one was like a supernova. They carried events, smells, faces, a city. She said, "Narte," and her homeworld flashed before her eyes, green restrictions and gravity towers. "Taryn." And he was alive again for a moment, looking at her, nodding. The word, and the symbol spread its wings, becoming higher, brighter. The creature behind the glass howled. The nameless lost one, he, the initial form. Where the eyes had been, there were now only cracks. He could not absorb the name as long as it sounded. But this was only the first phase. You have freed the word, but now be prepared to speak the true name of the Nameless One, said the symbol. Name him, and you will either destroy him or free him forever. Aleira turned pale. But he doesn't have a name. Everyone has them. It's just that some have been forgotten and some crossed out. Suddenly, a flash. She was no longer standing on the ship. She was in the past. The high R's stood before her, tall, shining, final. Their world was alive, and in the center of the room, the nurse being, the same, but smaller, calm, enveloped in chains of words. You see who he was. He was one of us, the one who wanted to become more than the name, the one who wanted to become silence. Hihari gave her knowledge. The Nameless One's name has been spoken once, but to speak it again, something must be given. Your name, your voice, your memory, your I. Aleira stood in a ring of light, surrounded by echoes of the past. Her skin cracked under the pressure of the word, which now flowed through her like blood. But inside, there was silence. Ominous. Tense. The Nameless One paused. He sensed the moment was near. The symbol didn't speak anymore. It just looked as if it knew that now it was her choice alone. There are two realities before her. In one, she retained her name, her identity. Her I remains whole. But the Nameless One will slip away. He will find new worlds, new words to destroy them. In another, she pronounces his true name. But for this, she will have to give herself. Not the president, but never to be. As if she never existed, not in memories, not in records, not in anyone's hearts. You will be the true sacrifice, the symbol whispered, not by death. She closed her eyes, and then she heard a voice, not her own, a child's, something she had dreamed about since childhood. His name is not a sound, it is a choice. It is you. Aleira understood. The Nameless One was born where fear is stronger than love for memory. He is not a being. He is erasure itself. He lives in everyone who wants to forget everything, to drop guilt, to erase the past. And she took a step, to the sound, towards darkness, to the pulsating mouth of the Nameless, black as the void itself. She looked at him and remembered. Your first step, mother's name, Taryn's laughter. Professor's voice gave her the first book in ancient languages. And then she uttered a name that is not in the alphabet, not in memory, not in logic. The word was to everyone and anything. It was like the exhalation before a baby's first cry. It was like a look between lovers, where words are not needed. That was the point. The word enveloped the Nameless One like a veil woven from light, smells, memories, tears, and joy. He howled, for the first time, for real, and disappeared. It didn't collapse. It was defeated. It just disappeared, as if it had never existed. Aleira fell to her knees. The symbol ran up, but stopped. Who are you? She looked up. There were stars in her eyes, but there was no reflection in them, no past, no future. I am nobody, she replied, and that is why I could name him. At that moment, the world changed. The high Hars came to life, somewhere in another laboratory in the universe. The extinguished stars began to shine, and Aleira's name disappeared from all databases. Even the symbol no longer remembered her name. But in the earthly world, in every whisper of the wind, in every vague dream of a small child, a new word sounded. It was warm, hope, and someday, if the darkness returns, this word will be repeated again. Year 327 after the erasure. On the outskirts of the Vylar Station's stellar archive, a boy named Kia discovered an ancient artifact, a small, unmarked silver disc. He found it in the wreckage of a ship drifting among charred meteors. There was no data on the disc, only silence. But when he pressed the disc to his ear, I'm nobody. A voice, quiet, like the whisper of a dying star. But there was something about it that made Kia's heart beat differently. He felt a memory he didn't have. He saw a woman, tall, with eyes full of stars. She walked right through you. He didn't know her name, but he knew. She saved his world. From this point on, Kia began to hear more. Words no one taught, songs that weren't in the archives, dreams where he spoke a language that erases you. He became the first after Aleira to hear echo. On the desert planet of Mir Enna, in the monastery of the Silent Orders, one of the priests, Laom, suddenly began to speak, for the first time in 62 years of the vow of silence. He said one word, Layar. All clocks on the planet stopped for 1 second. All the children on the surface began to cry at the same time and then laughed. A star that had not been seen since the creation of the system flashed in the sky. Laom did not know what the name he said meant, but when he touched the wall, the rune of light remained on it, just as it was on Aleira's chest when she called the Nameless. The Order understood. She had returned, not her own, not in spirit, in word. On Ornella 9, a rebuilt academy, a young linguist named Seth Avenir collected fragments of ancient messages. He discovered that many forgotten civilizations knew of the Nameless One before he was born. Their prophecies agreed on one thing. When silence swallows the song, one will be born who will be its echo. She will not live, but her word will become a new sun. Seth shuddered. He had heard the woman's voice in his dreams, all his life. He collected evidence, fragments of images, feelings, flashes of consciousness that had no source. They all had the same feeling. Someone, sometime, was very important. But the name was erased. Planet Viontria, 8 years later. Kia grew up. From a curious boy who heard the whispers of documents, he became a disciple of memory. But there was something different about him. He did not just hear. He felt the words. When he spoke, things around him vibrated, sometimes melodically, sometimes dangerously. He realized that he could influence matter through meaning. The order was afraid of him. The scholars were average, but he knew this was not a gift. This was a call. One night, when the whole city was asleep, he heard the voice again. Clear. Exact. Kia, he's coming back, but not alone. He woke up in a sweat. On his arm was a new sign, a rune, pulsating blue like the breath of a celestial whale. At Ornella 9, Seth Avenir was no longer just a researcher. His book about the nameless, although considered semi-fiction, became a cultural virus. People, having read it, began to remember what they could not remember, and then something strange happened. Some of them began to speak in the language of echo. Their speech caused events, fire, light, a choral singing of the air, but their faces became empty, as if they were losing something. Seth called them the Whisperers. He realized that part of Aleira's power had escaped into the world. But it wasn't just the light of her word that had been preserved. Something from the nameless had leaked out, too. On the edge of the Zalmar sector, the observatory picked up a strange signal. Dark, barely perceptible. It was not a message. It was a question. Who am I? The scientists went crazy. One girl remained pregnant. She drew a spiral of ashes and wrote next to it, "This is not him. This is what remains of those who were before him." And then a new fear arose, that the Nameless One was not alone. He was lost. And not to convince the darkness, the symbol that disappeared after Aleira's sacrifice spread again. On the planet Eilenor, in a mirror cave, the children found its reflection, although there was no one in the cave. He said, "While the name and memory are alive, there is light, but the word is split. Someone must collect it." And all three of them, Kia, Seth, and Laom, felt the call at the same time. In different ways, at different ends of the galaxy. The Echo Assembly was coming towards them. They were not chosen as heroes. And what about the vessels? The word returns, but the question is different. Who will now say the last name, and what will it destroy? Planet Laom, Forbidden Zone. Kia stood before the entrance to the Vault of Voices, a show no one had entered since Aleira's time. His song was leading, not music, but a song made of meaning. Every step echoed in the atmosphere with the vibration of words. "You introduce yourself, guide," said a voice in his head. He was no longer afraid. Words had become part of his blood. He could tell them apart. He knew which ones brought warmth, which ones brought anxiety. Behind him, slowly and silently, Seth appeared. "Did you hear her too?" Kea asked without turning around. "I wrote it," Seth said, holding out his hand. In his fingers was a scrap of paper with a phrase written on it. "Where three meanings converge, a fourth will be born." They exchanged glances. The third one came from the depths. Laom. He didn't say a word, but when he entered, the darkness retreated a step. What he brought with him was the ashes of the word, a vessel in which rested a particle of that light that once burned the word of the nameless. It whispered, "It's too early. They are not ready yet." He's already inside them. None of the three slept that night. Kea heard breathing. Not that. It came from within, like there was someone else under his skin, hidden in a memory he had never lived in. Seth read the texts, wrote them in his hand, but he didn't remember how they were created. On one page were the words, "The name changes form, but not the essence. Whoever gives himself a new name, let the new you in." And Laom had a dream. He stood in front of a mirror. In it was not him, a woman with eyes full of stars. "You will be the one to say the last name," she said, "but don't forget, the last name can be yours." He woke up, and for the first time in many years he was afraid. The symbol appeared again, this time in the flesh. It was no longer shining and light. Now it was statutory. "You are gathered. You are the keepers of the word shards, but ahead is the whisperer." Kia frowned. "Nameless? No, the one who came after. The one who was born out of worries has forgotten you. He is not silent. He whispers so that you do not hear yourself. He is the distorted meaning, the memory parasite. He can wear your face and speak your words. And he is already close." They entered the hall where the activation of the Song of Unification was to take place, an ancient ritual of the Ki'ars that collected part of the lost language into a single light. Kia stood in the center. He began to speak, and I got lost. There was another word in his voice, alien, dark. Laom rushed forward and touched his forehead. Seth spoke his name at that moment in the original Vylar dialect. And then a whisper burst forth from Kea, a dark cloud that formed the features of Aleira's, but distorted. "Thank you, you brought me back. Now I can speak for you." They stood in horror. The word is resurrected, but what voice does it speak with now? The distorted Aleira hung in the air, translucent, as if her image was not made of matter but of memories told with disappointment. The eyes were the same, but there was no light in them. Only an abyss. "I was forgotten, but you brought me back. Not the one I was, but the one you remembered me as." Kea stepped forward, trembling. You are echo of Aleira." She bowed her head. "I am her reflection in your guilt, in your fear. I am not the word. I am the error of repetition." The symbol shuddered. He knew what it meant. This is the first mask of the Whisperer. He is trying out forms. If you believe it, it will become truth. Seth took pity on the fists. "But she looks like her. She sounds like her. I even thought—" "And that's his power," the symbol barked. "He uses your guilt, your love. He's the snake in the heart of memory." Laom stepped forward. In his hands was the ashes of the word. He knew that if he unfolded it, it would burn away any lie, but it could also touch the true. He looked at the distorted Aleira. Her lips were trembling. "You don't want to disappear again?" She was silent. Only a drop of light rolled down her cheek. Was it a real feeling or perfectly simulated? Laom raised the dust, and at that moment she whispered his name. "Laom, before you became silent you sang, by the river in the wind, your sister." He froze. No one knew these words. Even he himself hardly remembered them. Set cried out, "Laom, don't listen. It's not her. He got into you through love." Late. Laom lowered the dust. The distorted Aleira touched his forehead and whispered, "The name is the door. Thank you for the key." Laom disappeared. An explosion of light threw everyone back. The twisted Aleira was no longer a phantom. She had a body now, a living one, a breathing one, flesh made of faith, memory, and a name. The symbol whispered. The Whisperer has found his avatar. After that, everything changed. The word no longer obeyed Kea. Seth couldn't write. The pen broke in his hands and the ink faded. And in the distance, in other worlds, the names of rivers, cities, even stars began to be forgotten. The dictionary of memory, the great high-R base, has malfunctioned. Some words have been replaced with empty fields. Others have been rewritten. The history of the world has begun to change. The Whisperer entered the fabric of reality. The symbol understood. Without the last name, the world cannot be saved. But it can't be found. It can only be created. And for this, we need to bring Aleira back. Real. If Echo can be transformed, then it can be purified. Ki and Seth must journey to the song beyond, a place where memory takes shape, where that which is no more can be summoned. But for this, each of them must make one sacrifice. My most important memory. Kia, Set, and Symbol stood at the gates of song, the ancient dimension where the word becomes flesh, thought becomes reality. Before them was a black lake, smooth as a mirror, but it reflected no faces or stars, only possibilities that had not yet happened. Symbol produced. Enter. Give the word that you do not want to lose, and receive that which can pass this song. Kia closed her eyes. He remembered his mother, the first time she called him by his name, that warm, simple moment. He whispered, "Take this," and it was gone. He no longer remembered her voice. Set gave the text. Not a book. The idea of a book that he always wanted to write. His own. It was erased from his consciousness. He didn't even know what he had lost, they answered. There was no time, only words. They floated through space like comets, whispers, screams, prayers, everything that had ever been said in all the worlds. And among them, she, Aleira, bright, whole, but without memory of itself. "Who am I?" she asked, looking at Kia. Seth stepped forward. He didn't know what to say. Not a single phrase would satisfy, not a single word. And then Kia did what seemed impossible. He gave her a name. "Nu. You are Laren. You were the one who became the word. Now you are the one who will complete the song." She blinked. The light in her wavered. And she remembered. Not everything, just the main things. "I sacrificed myself for memory. I returned for the future." She squeezed their hands. "Let's go." They returned to Laom, where the twisted Aleira, almost a deity, stood on the pedestal of words, ready to spread the new name, devoid of meaning. It would rewrite everything. But when the real Aleira came out to her, the world stopped. Two versions, lies and truth, met each other with their eyes. "You are my shadow," said Laren. "You are my weak spot," the distorted one whispered. They came together, not in battle, in one word repeated simultaneously. "I am true." And then there was silence, the one in which emptiness does not frighten, but peace comes. The distorted one disappeared. The whisperer was not destroyed, but recognized. And in the recognition are the subjects of power. Aleira stayed, as a human being, without power but with memory. Seth returned the words but no longer wrote. Kia became the first teacher of a new language, one that creates, not destroys. Laom, he returned, but remained silent until the end of his days. He became the living word, the embodiment of memory. And in the new library of stars, in the very center of the galaxy, phrases appeared, transformed into living stone. The name is light. Memory is a flame, and everyone who remembers, says the song further,